2, 1.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Adriana Sanchez-Aldana, the Executive Director of the California Council for Adult Education, CCAE. Welcome to our Legislative Day, or as we call it, Ledge Day webinar. Ledge Day and this webinar are generously sponsored by Burlington English and the GED Testing Service. We want to thank them for their ongoing support of our programs and our advocacy efforts, and we hope that you will also support them. Next slide. This year, Ledge Day is scheduled for the afternoon of Monday, April 8th, and all day Tuesday, April 9th. Thank you. That's the slide, the green one. Thank you. As in the recent past, we will be at the Hyatt Regency in Sacramento. At this point in time, there are still hotel rooms available at the Hyatt, and our group rate of $199 single or double occupancy is still available. You may access the link via the CCAE website at ccaestate.org, and our website is listed at the end of this presentation. Logistically, just before we get started, let me remind everybody to say hello. On the right panel of your screen, you're going to see a chat box. And if you type a message in there, a hello message in there, you can say who you are and where you're from, and just say hello in the chat box there on the right. For questions and answers throughout the webinar, at the bottom tray of your screen, there's a Q&A box. If you click on that, a screen will open up, or a small page will open up, and you can type in your questions there. Okay, next slide, please. Today's presenters are, of course, myself, Victoria Abate, CCAE State Ledge Chair and Director, College and Career and Adult Education at Mount Diablo, and Wayne Bulio, CAIA State Ledge Chair and Director of Torrance Adult School, and Don Kepke, of course, CCAE and CAIA Legislative and Budget Advocate. I'd also like to recognize Sharon Bonney of Bonney Business Solutions for managing the webinar for us. So now I'll turn the webinar over to Wayne, who will review today's agenda. Next slide.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
First of all, I would like to thank everyone for participating in the greater adult ed community, and certainly for the collaborative efforts of CCAE and Pauling as the president, as well as CAIA and Pauling, and then CCAE and Steve as the two organizations collaborated to assist Dawn in putting this together. As you can see, we have a number of activities from Assembly Budget Subcommittee hearing. Today we'll talk about the purpose of Ledge Day, the logistics of Ledge Day, preparing for Ledge Day, and our key issues. But really what we want to do here is tell our story so that we have a collective message, so that our legislators hear us as one voice, as one message. So thank you, and we'll move forward with the PowerPoint, and I'll see you in Sacramento.
Victoria.
Yes. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the webinar. I think some of you have been on webinars with us before for past Ledge Days. We've been doing this now for, this will be, I think, year 3. So we're very excited about Ledge Day coming up very quickly. What you see on your screen is the Sacramento schedule of events, which Adriana went over briefly. We will see many of you that come, particularly those of you in Southern California, often come up the night before. We will see you in Sacramento at the Hyatt. We are going to have a Ledge Day reception. Location is not yet worked out. We have a couple of spots in mind, but we will be e-broadcasting or e-blasting the information as soon as that's pinned down. The reception is really a member get-together. It's an opportunity to network. We will do a briefing for those who are present so that you will have as much information as possible and feel really prepared for the next day. We will then on the next morning, which is Tuesday, April 9th, rather early, 7:30 to 8, serve a light breakfast in one of the rooms. It's actually, I think, the same room, right, Adriana, the Hyatt Regency? Is it the Big Sur room for the morning also?
Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you, sorry.
Mm-hmm.
So meet us in the Big Sur room at the Hyatt Regency for breakfast, 7:30 to 8, and the Ledge Day briefing, which will be done primarily by Dawn. Dawn will also do part of the briefing, I think, on Monday night, although that will be pretty much a general short briefing. The bigger briefing will be that 8 to 9 a.m. slot on the day of Ledge Day. Then at 9 o'clock, Dawn has invited us and helped to arrange the Assembly Budget Subcommittee, number 2, is actually having a hearing on adult education budget items. So she has invited us to attend. So we'll talk about that more when you're in Sacramento. Students are welcome as well. All of your Ledge team are welcome. We want to be present there to hear and maybe to share some comments. And as I mentioned, we'll talk more about that later. Your Ledge Day visits should all be, we hope, by now scheduled or close to being finished in the scheduling. Once the briefing is over at 9 o'clock, and if you need to leave before then for an appointment, you can, but then we'll be spending the day running around the Capitol, visiting our legislators, sharing our talking points, which Dawn will go into shortly, as well as about our statewide consortia work. 3 o'clock, meet us back at the Hyatt Regency in the Big Sur room. It's an optional debrief. We know many people need to head out to the airport, but it's a great time for us to network further and hear about the day. Also, we are looking forward to hearing directly from you about what went well, what we can improve. There will be an opportunity on our CCAE app to do that, but there's nothing like hearing it directly from you. So we will see you there Monday, April 8th, or Tuesday, April 9th, or both on the 8th and the 9th.
Great. So welcome, everyone. This is Dawn Kepke. I'm happy to be with you this Friday afternoon. So let's jump in with regard to the adult education hearing that Victoria mentioned within the budget subcommittee on the Assembly side. So it's a great opportunity. You may recall a few years ago, it worked out that hearing was scheduled to align with Ledge Day as well. It doesn't often happen exactly that way, but we were really fortunate that the committee was willing to work with us on that, get that set up on that day. And it presents a great opportunity to, participate in the dialogue and discussion about the status of the adult education system, both in the K-12 system, community college system, what have you, but also a great opportunity for all of you who plan to attend Ledge Day to join us in person in that hearing to, say a quick, note of support for adult education and specifically our request that we'll talk about relative to increased funding. So in terms of logistics, again, that hearing is going to be first thing in the morning, Tuesday of Ledge Day, April 9th. It'll start at about 9 a.m. That Tuesday morning. There are a few things on their agenda that morning. So just ahead of the adult education item, for those of you that also are very interested in career technical education, they'll be discussing the CTE budget proposals put forth by the governor and advocates. So that'll be interesting. And then following that will be the adult education item. They have a few items after that. It's not yet certain whether they will accept public comment right after the adult education item or if it'll be at the end of the hearing. Either way, we'll have more detail for you as staff is continuing to kind of put together that agenda. So we'll have more detail in terms of exact timing as we get a little bit closer and for our next webinar follow-up in just a couple of weeks. But in the meantime, that will be held in the state capitol, room 447. So for those of you that have been to the Capitol, that's going to be on the historic side on the 4th floor. So again, we'll chat a little bit more in terms of details about that. But really want to just encourage you, presuming you do not have specific meetings set with legislators or staff during that time, or even if you have to step out, we definitely would welcome you to join us on the fourth floor to the extent that we can fit as many of you as possible into the room. That would be great. But certainly they'll have the TVs on up there and certainly can make a strong stand for adult ed. So in terms of the committee members and kind of really working on your end ahead of the hearing with your local elected officials, these members you see here on the screen, Assemblyman Kevin McCarty is the chair of the committee. You may recall he's been incredibly supportive of adult ed, worked with us last year on a number of our budget requests relative to changing the name of the adult education program, as well as indirect funding rates, COLA, what have you. So it's been a great champion. He also was the author of our immigrant integration metrics bill. So very strongly in support. And he, has shared with us that he's very interested in wanting to be helpful relative to securing additional funding. But again, we have to do our legwork to get support from his colleagues in the legislature to help him move that forward. So definitely encourage those of you in the Sacramento area in Mr. McCarty's district to reach out early and often leading up to this hearing and thereafter to really ensure that he's hearing from his constituents in his district about the importance of securing additional funding for adult education. Those of you in kind of the Southern California, kind of Lower Orange County, Dana Point area, Assembly Member Bill Breaux, also on the committee, kind of Northern California out of Yuba City and above, James Gallagher. Those of you kind of on Central Coast, Santa Barbara, Ventura area, you have Assembly Member Monique Limon. Those in kind of Inland Empire, Riverside area, Jose Medina, who also was a former teacher in adult ed programs in the K-12 system, which is great. Assemblyman Murasucci from Torrance, kind of Torrance area there in Los Angeles on the coast. And then also Assembly Member Patrick O'Donnell, who has also been very supportive kind of out of the Long Beach area. So definitely encourage all of you that are in their districts to reach out to them soon and to reach out to their district offices as well as capital offices, indicating that you are constituents, that you will be attending the adult education hearing and be there for Ledge Day to make sure that they make the connection on that and that you really look forward to working with them to support increased funding for adult education in the budget this year. Additionally, as far as, kind of more detail on kind of the public comment, typically we find that these hearings can run quite long. We'll hear a presentation from the Department of Finance, as well as the Legislative Analyst Office on the governor's proposal. At this point, that governor's proposal includes a COLA for adult education, which is incredibly positive. But as you all well know, that's not quite enough from our perspective. So one of the things that we'll expect to do is to have you, if you're available and not in another meeting with another member, to join us at that hearing. And during the public comment period, you're typically given about 1 minute, which goes by incredibly fast. But the chair often really kind of puts a very tight rein on that minute time frame. But nevertheless, it's a great opportunity to say your name, share your position and program expertise, what adult school you are with, and kind of what city you're from. And that would be really incredibly helpful. Also, just a brief mention that I support CCAE and CAIE's request for $110 million increase in adult education funding and appreciate the administration's provision of a COLA. And it could be that simple, that short. Sometimes they'll let you eke in with another word or two, but I would definitely just say even just a brief mention of who you are, where you're from, and supporting that increased funding request would be incredibly helpful. Let's go ahead and move forward to the next slide, please. So kind of getting more to the broader purpose of Ledge Day. Again, that'll be actually kicking off on that Tuesday, April 9th. And as we've discussed in the past, really Ledge Day is a matter of ensuring that we're providing education and information on our priorities, who we are, in these legislators' districts. And their meetings oftentimes, with legislators, sometimes with legislative staff, but really important to remember that it's often the staff that are really driving decisions made by these members. So to the extent that you're not able to get a meeting right with directly with the legislator, but instead with their staff, that's still an important meeting to have, and really stressing that your constituents in their district is really incredibly important for better securing their buy-in on kind of what we're going to be advocating for. So really, kind of again, it's that education component. Who are K-12 adult schools? And on that point, and just to be clear, these members juggle a lot of different policy and budget issues over the course of a year. So sometimes they need a little hand-holding to remind them who we are, what we do, who we serve. So I think, it's really, better safe than sorry to go into these meetings with, kind of the opportunity and perspective that really some baseline information that, in theory, they should already know and probably do, just as a means to remind them kind of who we are, who we serve, what have you, is really important. I don't think even myself, I never take anything for granted when I go in to meet with members and staff, because oftentimes they will have been working on an entirely different issue 5 minutes before, maybe an environmental issue. So then, helping them to kind of switch gears to focus and understand kind of what we're talking about is really important. So don't hesitate, don't shy away from really that baseline information, and certainly be sure to kind of not just, refer to the adult ed program as CAPE. You want to make sure that you're actually not just using acronyms, you're actually kind of spelling out what it is we're talking about. Also ensuring that you're talking about who you serve, what types of programs you offer in their districts for the students that you serve. Also talking about value of adult education broadly, certainly for students, families, communities, and really I think, highlighting some of these specific programmatic activities you're doing, the great work you're doing, perhaps, tying in kind of specifically, programming that you're doing in terms of serving immigrant students, citizenship, certainly kind of a lot of receptivity to those particular types of programs and services, as well as given this really kind of growing interest and support for increasing supports for early childhood education. For those of you that have, great programs in that kind of early childhood education, family literacy activities, really important to share that, stress kind of the work that you're doing, and kind of the tie-in, the relationship that has with the broader goal around supporting early childhood learners. And I see that I forgot to change the AEBG reference. My apologies in the slide. But nevertheless, I certainly want to provide kind of a brief update on your regional consortia activities, your progress, your challenges. Although I think really probably kind of just minimal talk about that. I think really the important thing is, kind of knowing who you are, who you're serving, what have you. I don't want to drag down these meetings with, talking about the challenges, because we really want to make sure that we have time to get straight to the meat of the discussion and why you're there, which is around some of these funding asks. And also, just note that there are, certainly a long list of issues that we are well aware of, and certainly will continue to work to address. But really, we're very laser focused in terms of our asks this year. In terms of relationship building, keep in mind that a lot of these newer members could serve up to 12 years in the legislature under the new term limits. So really, it's a great opportunity to build relationships that are going to kind of help support and sustain adult education for the long run. So really a great opportunity. And that relationship building shouldn't just be on Ledge Day in the Capitol, but also in the districts where you live. And also, ensuring that you're tying the advocacy that we're doing, that I'm doing on your behalf in the Capitol, to the work that you're doing locally is really important as well. And then in addition to education, relationship building, it's also obviously advocating for various policy and budget priorities. Next slide, please. So we've talked oftentimes about kind of the importance of political action, grassroots advocacy, and you've heard me say countless times over the years that if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. Well, an important means by which to be at that table and avoid being on the menu is, really kind of what we call a three-legged stool. Instituting lobbying and advocacy, kind of with political action and grassroots activity, and kind of where that all comes together, you have kind of the stability of the stool, the three-legged stool, and legislative success. So really the work you're going to be doing at Ledge Day is a little bit of all three of these. It's leveraging kind of the political influence you all have as constituents, as voters in these members' districts, along with kind of your grassroots activity, highlighting kind of the support from the field, from your students, what have you, and actually taking the time to come to Sacramento to do the lobbying and advocacy to support those goals and needs. So really great opportunity, and kind of the convergence of all of those is really where we have the best chance of success. Next slide, please. So in terms of logistics for Ledge Day at the Capitol, again, Tuesday morning briefing session, as was highlighted, that'll kick off at 8 a.m. on Tuesday morning at the Hyatt, just across the street from the Capitol. We really encourage you to wear your red shirts. I know there are a number of adult schools and groups that have been really, really just doing great work locally in terms of advocacy and really kind of branding the red shirts as a means to support adult ed, which is fantastic. Encourage that. Additionally, as in the past, CCAE will be handing out green buttons in support of adult education that we'd also encourage you to wear into the Capitol while you're there. We, as usual, will have legislator packets that will be provided to the CCAE section leads at that Monday night reception. Those materials, as like last year, are being prepared by McNally Temple and Kelly Reed and her team. We heard a lot of great feedback from you all. Thank you from last year, and just the level of professionalism that those materials just offered and kind of elevating our advocacy efforts. So we're aiming and endeavoring to keep that high level of professionalism and kind of support, and Kelly and her team are definitely on target to help us with that and really kind of make sure that we're putting our best foot forward. We would also, as we've discussed before, encourage you to bring local materials to add to your packets that you'll leave behind with legislators. So NASCAR letters in support of adult education, your local Adult Education Week resolutions, student letters, if you have an overview or white paper of your consortium, your activities there. Also, we've talked before, and I've encouraged many of you, or all of you really, to put together kind of your adult school, like white paper fact sheet, if you will. Those are really great to put in there as well, just to kind of provide a better snapshot that staff and the legislator can refer back to later. And then certainly any letters of support you have from superintendents, your boards, what have you, all very, very positive. And I would also note, just in terms of kind of your actual visits with legislators and their staff, I mean, keep in mind, most of these meetings are confined to about 20 or 30 minutes. So you want to really make sure you're being mindful of your time and making sure that you get to the ultimate asks, which we'll get to. Next slide, please. And I would also just note with regard to the materials, if there are any questions, we do have, thank you, Kelly Reed with McNally Temple on the webinar. And certainly if there are any questions, we can get answers for you on that as well. In terms of preparing for Ledge Day, again, you want to make sure you're familiarizing yourselves with briefing materials. We will be sending those out, if not later today, first thing on Monday morning. We have a white paper on our asks that we'll talk about. We additionally have some more concise talking points that we have to share as well as a support letter for both of the asks we'll discuss as well. So we have a lot of information that'll be coming to you, if not later today, on Monday. So definitely watch for all that and encourage you to familiarize yourself with those details well in advance. You feel comfortable with them, and certainly give some time to prep any final questions you have for our next webinar to make sure you are kind of able to put your strongest foot forward. In terms of legislators you'll be visiting, make sure, as was said, that you have those meetings set up and moving those forward. And you also want to make sure you know a bit about those members or their staff that you're meeting with. So, if it's, a Republican from Northern California, messages for those members may be slightly different than, meeting with an urban Los Angeles member. So perhaps, from, working with a Republican and meeting with a Republican from Northern California, you may want to focus on kind of the opportunities adult education provides in terms of lifting families, out of poverty and really putting them on a successful track to, workforce and post-secondary higher education. When it comes to, a member out of perhaps Los Angeles area, certainly, important talking points around, again, children and families and support for early childhood education, but also, the work you're doing in terms of serving immigrant students, who are on the pathway to, citizenship, what have you. And some of those are really important points that you may need to adjust in terms of what your focus is on based on kind of what you learn about that particular legislator. In terms of day of coordination, it's best to identify kind of a lead for each meeting, really, to make sure you're kind of organized going into that, who will attend that meeting with the lead, divvy up some of those talking points and ensure that everyone in your group is prepared to talk about that. I know we've had great participation the last few years from students, which is phenomenal. Oftentimes we have heard and seen that the members and staff actually are really more interested in terms of hearing from the students relative to their experiences and opportunities that adult ed has provided them. So definitely want to make sure that our students have the opportunity to tell their story. But as the section lead, as well as the other participants, you really want to make sure that after the students have had a chance to talk about their experiences and benefits, to really bring it back around to say, we'd like to serve, more students, with these exact needs and provide more students the opportunity. The challenge is the stagnant funding, and bringing us back to our ask of additional funding is really critical. These are the and then pull out some of the statistics from your region, around kind of those that needs that are not being met, whether it's related to ESL, basic skills, CTE, what have you, and the opportunities you can provide if provided additional funding. Also talking about in cases where you may be in a position that you're having to cut programming because of, kind of the stagnant funding situation. Also bringing that back around to say, we really, pride ourselves on, the great work we've done with, our students here, Susie Q. At the same time, we're having to cut programming, and, other students like Susie, won't have as much access going forward because we're struggling on a funding level. So really just make sure you're trying to loop the conversation back around to, at every turn, highlight everything in the context of the support and need for additional funding. Additionally, all of that said, and that seems like a lot, keep in mind that, again, we're under that kind of 20-minute, maybe 30 with some questions with each member and their staff. So you definitely want to be as efficient as possible so that you can get through all of that and leave a few minutes for questions. Also, you want to make sure that you're listening carefully and observing body language and reactions from the legislator and staff. These members are going to be jumping between meetings as well as committee hearings that day. So, if they're starting to fidget, if they're grabbing, their phone, if they're, getting their papers together and, making like they're going, they're ready to get up and move, then that means you need to wrap it up, even if you haven't gotten to all of your points. But really, opportunity to make sure your paying attention is really good. You don't want to lose kind of sight of that and have them, start to tune out to the discussion. Also, don't argue and always be respectful. If a point of disagreement arises, you definitely do not want to engage in kind of toe-to-toe debate on things. Just acknowledge point of view and basically kind of move on. If there are questions that are raised that you cannot answer, just let them know. We'd be happy to follow up, and just be sure that you get a note off to Victoria, Wayne, and myself, and we'll do our best to follow up quickly to ensure that they get the answers that they are looking for. Next slide, please. With regard to the ask, so we have the increased funding ask. I mean, you'll recall that we've talked a lot over the last few years. We've had numerous conversations with finance, the administration, legislative staff, budget consultants about the importance of looking at additional funding. And again, while we were successful in achieving a 2-year COLA last budget cycle for this year, we were very clear that that's not sufficient to avoid losing capacity and access for programming. And we know that there are even adult schools in the state that are already and have already cut programming and staff this actual school year because of the stagnant funding levels at $500 million within the adult ed program. It's clearly not sufficient to meet the needs, whether it's related to increasing costs and what have you. So in terms of, the ask and the key issue, again, the governor and the administration have wonderfully included another COLA for us in this proposed fiscal year 19-20 budget cycle. But we were very clear that while we appreciated that, it's not sufficient, that stagnant funding overall at $500 million is unacceptable. And at the end of the day, while that COLA is helpful, it's not necessarily covering all of the cost increases that we're seeing across the state and for individual adult schools. And that's a problem in terms of capacity and meeting needs, what have you. So in terms of the actual ask, what we are saying is that thank you for the COLA that you provided, Department of Finance and Governor, but it's not enough. It has to be paired with additional funding. We're proposing $110 million to cover increasing costs, maintain capacity, and grow access. Essentially, that $110 million may sound like a familiar number. We opted to continue our advocacy around that based on the proposal we put forward last year, which essentially that $110 million is made up. And again, we'll be getting you a white paper that explains the details in more depth. But suffice it to say the $110 million is made up of really kind of 3 buckets of funding for various purposes. You have $30 million to institute the CLASP report recommendations, which really was focused on ensuring that we're focused on and serving communities of need and tying that along with a portion, not all, but a portion of incentive funding to do so. Really kind of, again, with the thought that we are well positioned in adult schools to deliver those outcomes and really kind of ensure that through that type of approach, we would be very strongly situated, if not really, more competitive than anyone to, make sure that we are driving the bulk of that incentive funding, if not all of it, to adult schools. Additionally, another portion of that funding ties back to backfilling for career technical education programs. You may recall there's been a lot of discussion about whether there should be fees that are able to be charged. We've suggested that, that the flexibility to charge fees is important, particularly to the extent that we hit another recession. The ability to charge fees would be important flexibility-wise to cover costs if need be. But also, additionally, to the extent that, we, have opportunity to grow those programs and access, there could be kind of a number of different ways, but to support CTE programming in adult schools. And then finally, an infusion of additional dollars to grow capacity and to cover the increasing costs related to salary increases, STIRs, PERS, what have you. So again, we have a white paper for you on that. That again breaks down exactly what those components are. So we'll definitely be getting that out, as I said, if not later today, on Monday to the field. So definitely watch for that, and that should provide a bit more context and detail around that. And so, yeah, so that's really kind of, again, we really, as part of our budget asks, increased funding is the ask. We are not, unlike last year, where we were focused on kind of a number of kind of more technical, if you will, components to support the ask for additional funding, a lot of which you may recall we achieved. We are just keeping the ask very simple, and it's around increased funding. Next slide, please. So that was the budget front. The other issue that we are working on is related to teacher credentialing for adult education teachers. And you may recall we distributed a white paper last fall, really kind of starting to sketch out kind of a potential for an alternative pathway to help supplement the opportunities for prospective adult ed teachers to obtain and clear their credential that would provide kind of opportunity at a reduced cost as well as kind of reduced timeline. Now, we unfortunately did get a lot of pushback from a number of different entities. And so we, in working with Assemblymember Carrillo, Wendy Carrillo out of Los Angeles, who is very interested in kind of supporting adult education and ensuring above all else that there is access and availability of programming for students, and that, you know, to the extent that there are shortages of qualified teachers in parts of the state, that, you know, we're ensuring we are able to identify, you know, and provide pathways for ensuring that those classrooms are, you know, staffed and able to offer greater programming for students. But essentially, given kind of some of that pushback and work that perhaps still needs to be done, we are sponsoring AB 1658 with Assemblymember Carrillo, but we have revised the approach to getting at the underlying issue. You may recall in Senate Bill 173 of a number of years ago, we worked with Senator Carol Liu to essentially require the Commission on Teacher Credentialing and Academic Senate to convene and look at and provide recommendations for adult education teachers in terms of reciprocity and qualifications. Unfortunately, they did not come back with strong recommendations that really provided any opportunity to move forward. And on kind of the other side of that, you have the legislative analyst who has suggested just eliminating the adult education K-12 teaching credential entirely. Now, we are very strongly opposed to eliminating the credential, but do believe that it warrants a discussion about opportunities to decrease the costs associated with obtaining and clearing that credential, as well as perhaps, you know, kind of just some efficiencies in that process from a time and cost standpoint. But all of that said, we essentially are revising the approach such that we would be reconvening a work group under the Commission on Teacher Credentialing that wouldn't just be the Commission and Academic Senate putting together a work group, but would instead also convene adult school representatives, non-credit community colleges, representatives, labor from CTA, CFT, UTLA, what have you, and CDE and the superintendent, what have you, so that we can really push the envelope of those discussions to drive home actual recommendations from this work group that are workable, that the stakeholders have had a chance to participate in those discussions and come to a stronger agreement on how best to tackle the issue. Additionally, in order to kind of ensure that some of the issues raised around the original approach we'd proposed are really tackled head on, we have specified in language we're working on with the author about this work group really having the goal of addressing some of the key issues and concerns we've heard from labor, from CTA, CFT, UTLA, and others around employment patterns, permanency for teachers, funding levels, and reciprocity, all of which, we, have heard and understand have differing levels of impact on identifying qualified teachers to teach in adult ed. We have a very strong network of teachers in our adult education system, and we want to make sure that some of the concerns that we heard from you all about employment patterns, permanency, funding, how that all ties in and feeds into kind of the ability to ensure we have teachers prepared and able to kind of support our students in the field. So the second ask on the policy front would be to ask legislators to support AB 1658 by Assemblymember Wendy Carrillo. The bill has not yet been set for hearing, and we're working on some amendments that will go into that bill. Right now, I think it's a spot bill that just suggests it's about environmental education, but amendments are forthcoming on that. Next slide. So at this point, I am going to turn it over to Victoria and Adriana, I believe. And we'll take some questions here shortly.
Thank you, Dawn. Wasn't that a great presentation? Thank you so much. Lots of information, a lot to think about, and a few things to prepare for. And to help you with that, I would like to share with you, those who are not familiar with our CCAE app. It is a great app that you can use for Ledge Day, and not just Ledge Day, but we're going to talk about it for just a minute in terms of Ledge Day. It is still being worked on a little bit because things are changing up a little bit in format this year. But if you look at the slide on the right side in particular, you will see that there is a Senate contact roster. And that is a PDF version, which you can actually download if you really want to, but it is at your command for finding who your local legislators are, their names, their contact information, all of that is there. Dawn helps to update that every year, so it's an accurate list and will be very useful for you in preparing, and also just in reference on Ledge Day, for reference on Ledge Day, as you see the names of other legislators or hear about other legislators. This year, we will not have the Adult Ed Rally, which we had last year, but we might bring it back. But on the day of Ledge Day, there will be a lot of networking that you can do. And the app is great for networking because we post, we can tweet, we can share information, and then it gets archived, which is really helpful. So the app will be a great way for you to connect with other colleagues, students, faculty, classified staff members, all there to advocate and support the message for adult ed. When you are finished with your visits, you will be able to actually provide us with your comments and input on how the visits went via the app. And we will tell you more about that when you come up to Ledge Day, but it's pretty simple. We get two kinds of information from you about the day. One, very specifically about visits, if there's anything particular that you want to share or tell us so that we can follow up. Does it require a follow-up conversation by Dawn? Is there something that we need to send? And so that will come to us via the app by your request through what you put into the evaluation. The other is really just a general overall evaluation of the day for program improvement, which we're all accustomed to. How can we do this better? How can we improve for next year? Your legislative committee, which is your CCAE State Legislative Committee, is listed there also. And I just want to give a shout out to them quickly. In the base section, we have the team of Eric Saavedra and Tim Doyle at San Mateo Adult. Central section, we have Celeste Travis, who is new as our section ledge chair there from Owens Valley Career Development Center. LA Metro section, Sonia Ramirez, Harbor Occupational Center. Northern section, Patricia Bradshaw, Sac City Adult Education. South Coast, Virginia Espana from Tri-Community Adult School. And Southern section, Pam Garamoni from Poway Unified School District. So these will be your local leaders, and they will assist you with anything you need to prepare for Ledge Day. They will also be coordinating visits, we want to make sure that folks don't duplicate visits. We would really rather you, if two different schools have the same legislator, we would really love for you to team up and go in together to meet the legislator with a message and also to hear about the wonderful work at your school. So the app, we're coming back to that, will have that information on available to you there with their contact information. And of course, Legislative and Government Budget Advocate is Dawn Kepke, and her information is there as well. And then we have a section for archives. So please, if you haven't downloaded the app, it's really, really simple. Go to the CCAE website and go under the, go where it says app. There you'll see there's a drop-down menu, and download the app. For those of you who have a LinkedIn profile, you can easily connect your LinkedIn profile with it as well. So I think that will do it for a brief introduction or review of the CCAE app. And although I can't see you all, and I know you can't see me, I'm looking forward to seeing you in your red shirts and your green buttons on Ledge Day. And I think we're ready for the next and final slide, which would be questions for Dawn, for any of us. If there are questions, you can please use the Q&A box for questions. And we have been answering questions as we've gone along, so hopefully we've answered all the questions up to this point in time.
Right, Victoria, do you want to kind of review a couple of the questions that we've been answering? People have been asking about, you know, how do they know who to coordinate with and so forth. And
yes.
So do you want to address that, please?
Yes, I can. So I think the simplest way would be on our CCAE website, and then as mentioned on our app, you will have our section ledge chairs listed for your section. If you're not sure where your school is and what section, I think that most of you will not have that question, but if you do, you can feel free to contact either Adriana or me, and our email addresses are also on the CCAE website. Another way a lot of people do the initial research is simply Google, who is my legislator? And it will direct you to the state sites for the Senate and the Assembly, and it's really easy from there to put in your zip code, and all the information comes up as to who your legislator is. Does that answer it? Do you think, Adriana, anything else from your end?
No, I think you covered it. One of the things, another question that we had was who makes these appointments for me? And I think that you and Dawn have covered very clearly that we make our own appointments, and at this point we don't have a central place to gather that information, but that's why we refer to the sections a lot, because that's kind of our central place and a little bit smaller number level to deal with. But we are looking to go forward with a coordinating piece of software, not for this Ledge Day, but potentially for the next one.
Yes.
But what we found works best is that people from agencies be in contact with their local legislator, not only on this one Ledge Day, but also throughout the school year. Invite them to your graduations, to your celebrations, and even if they don't come, their staffers will come, and they'll get to know you that way, at least. You know, share your newsletter if you have it, that kind of thing. So yeah, it is a grassroots kind of effort.
Yes, and on the important point of who to let you know about the appointments, it is our hope and our expectation that your section ledge chairs are already in communication with your schools. They may not be in correct communication with you, but they should be, if you're part of the leadership team, administrative team, in communication with your school to help with visits if need be. many of our schools now, as you mentioned, Adriana, have a direct and a really good relationship with their local legislators and just get a jump on that as soon as they know April's coming around to make their appointments. We would ask that you please let your section ledge chair know when your appointments are, to help with a little tracking and also to help with coordination. So as I mentioned, it's really powerful when two schools can come together if they have the same legislator, and the students can speak as one voice for the message we have this year, as opposed to making those duplicate visits with one group going out and the other going in, passing like ships in the night. So please remember to communicate with your section ledge chair. And I think we didn't have any other general questions. We had more specific questions.
Actually, we do have a question, and it is, how long will the 9 o'clock assembly meeting last, more or less? So maybe that's something that Dawn can address.
Hi, yeah. So it's kind of a bit hard to answer that at this point, largely because the timing will depend on how engaged and how many questions the legislators who sit on that committee are with each of the items. Again, the CTE item will be ahead of the adult education issue on the budget agenda. And so I do imagine that the CTE discussion will be a bit lengthy. And so it's hard to say for certain. I will say, you know, if you have meetings scheduled right at 9 o'clock, I mean, feel free to go to them. And to the extent that they fall during the discussion of the adult ed budget item, that is definitely the priority, is for you to get to those meetings you have scheduled. But to the extent that your meetings are not until kind of early afternoon or what have you, I mean, definitely plan to join us on the fourth floor for that hearing. I am working with the budget committee staff on kind of the agenda and kind of presentation, what have you, and so hope to have a bit more detail in terms of timing, but I think it's very possible that relative to the timing for the CTE item as well as adult ed item, that we could be in that committee for potentially, you know, 2 hours. I don't know that it'll be quite that long, but it's certainly possible. The other unknown, as I mentioned earlier, is it's not certain as of yet whether the chair will take public comment on the adult education item right after the presentation by finance and the legislative analyst, or if he will wait until they've gotten through their entire agenda. I'm going to be working with staff to hopefully help get them on board to open up public comment right after the agenda item so that you all can jump right in and get on with your day. But it's not certain. I'll definitely have more information in time for our next webinar.
In time for our next webinar, and or definitely at Ledge that Monday evening, right?
Absolutely, for sure.
Thank you.
Great, thank you, Dawn. We just reviewed the questions in the Q&A box. Please, if you have more questions, let us know before we close out, or any specific comments you want to make could be entertained also here, if it's particularly if it would be helpful for all the participants that are on with us today.
Right, I do want to mention that today's webinar is being recorded, and so those people who heard us live will be able to hear us yet again. You'll be receiving an email, actually, letting you know when the webinar is available, the recording of the webinar is available for you to listen to again. I'm not sure if we have any other questions. If we don't, let's go to the last slide, which is a reminder. Next slide, please.
Oh.
Maybe not.
Yeah, I don't know.
That's okay. Well, the next slide basically is a reminder that, there it is, we've got another webinar. And it is scheduled for Friday, April 5th, again at 12 noon, just like this one. basically it's going to be the same information. It's an opportunity for those who were unable to view today's webinar to sign up and view it on Friday, April 5th. So if you have colleagues or know of others who are interested in viewing the information again, please make them aware of this additional opportunity to review the key points for Ledge Day. And again, you have the opportunity to not only listen to the recording of this webinar, if you'd like to, you may also sign up again for the webinar on Friday, April 5th. And again, even if your colleagues or friends are not able to view the webinar live on Friday, April 5th, signing up, as I said, ensures that they will receive the link to the recording after the webinar is over. So the link at the bottom of this slide can be used to access the webinar sign up for April 5th, and it can also be used to access the hotel information, reservation information at the Hyatt. So if we have no further questions, and it looks like we don't, then I believe we're ready to conclude the webinar. So I'd really like to thank all of our panelists and our participants for their great questions and great support. We all look forward to seeing each other. We look forward to seeing you at Ledge Day on April 8th and 9th. And we thank you so much. Thank you to the panelists. Thank you to Sharon as well. Thank you very much and take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you all. See you on Ledge Day.